Welcome, everybody. It's time once again for the next chapter with Charlie Hedges as he explores turning the page on his life and yours.
You know, today I feel that our show is perhaps one of our best, and oddly enough, it's on a subject that some may view as a rather tired subject, in that we talk a lot about authenticity, and we've talked about it on our show, but I've got to tell you, Vicki Znavor and her new book, Authenticity ReAwakened, provide enormously valuable insight into how to live a meaningful and purposeful life. It's really brilliant material. As you will see in our discussion, Vicki and her book offer not only excellent content, but also very fascinating and intriguing personal discovery exercises that will be fun for you to do. After hearing Vicki Znavor, you will be absolutely clear on the value of personal authenticity and why it is so essential to, 1, know who you really are, 2, to know what matters to you in a major way, and 3, to know how to bring that self into the world. Vicki offers brilliant suggestions for living a brilliant life. So with that, let's bring on Vicki Znavor. Vicki Znavor, welcome to the next chapter with Charlie.
Thanks so much, Charlie. It's great to be with you tonight. I really appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, it is going to be fun. And today, you know what I want to do, Vicki, is I want to spend time talking about your very relevant new book, Authenticity ReAwakened, and it has a subtitle of The Path to Owning Your Life Story and Fulfilling Your Purpose. I think that's quite hefty topic that I'm excited about talking about.
Well, I was excited to write about it.
Did it just flow and come out, or was it a year-long process? What was that process like?
Well, the entire process took about 7 months, and I would say that once I was able to develop an outline from beginning to end, and most of us have written papers either for high school or college, and it's the same kind of process. You sit down, you write an outline, you think about what you're going to, what your purpose for the book is, and then you basically break down chapter by chapter, and then you set about writing. And writing is a challenge only because you've got to really make sure that you keep your reader in mind. Who is your ideal reader? And it's much like what you do with your show, Charlie, that you're thinking about your audience when you're putting pen to paper, when you're talking to your audience on your show. And it's the same with a book. But it is a wonderful process of discovery. You learn a lot about yourself. I certainly learned a lot about myself as I was writing it, and ultimately, I think I put out a work that I'm really proud of.
Oh, that's good. I'm so happy for you. So let's talk about your work. Let's begin with an overview. And you know what I'm curious about? We'll define authenticity in just a bit, but tell me, what is it that awakened your authenticity personally?
Sure. So actually, the title is Authenticity ReAwakened.
I thought so. I'm so sorry. Forgive me, because that seemed, and I looked at my notes and I had awakened. And I thought, oh well, this is what happens when you get back from Uganda and you try to do work.
Yeah, no worries at all. You know, in a reawakening is just multiple awakenings. So, the reason why I use the word reawakened in the title of authenticity, and I know we're going to dig into the definition of authenticity in a moment, but the reason I did that is that who we are changes over our lifetime. So who we are at 15 or 10, when we go to 25, 35, 45, we have different experiences in life. And as we get more experiences, as we do more reflection on the kind of person that we are and the values that we hold dearly, we continue to learn more about who we truly are. And over a lifetime, if we're blessed enough to have a long life, we get closer and closer to understanding what our true purpose was, to why were we here, and what was most important to us to achieve. So this is why, I think that, understanding who you are is so important, but it is an iterative process. So you've got to constantly stay in touch with yourself and understand what's really important to you. And if you don't mind, I'll actually just dive into what the definition of authenticity is, because it may give us that commentary a little bit more context.
Sure.
So I believe that authenticity is knowing who you are, knowing what truly matters to you, and then showing up in the world in a way that reflects that to the extent that you wish to do so. So I'll go back now with that in context in mind. Knowing who you are and knowing what matters most to you is something that we continue to learn over time.
Yeah, is it, I so agree with you. I so agree, because it was actually a question I had later, so I'm glad we're getting into it right now. And that it is, I see it as a process, and we can be true to who we are right now, but we are evolving. We're growing. We're growing people. So who I am right now may not be precisely who I am 10 years from now. And at 71 years old, I'm able to count back and see that I was true to who I was at that time. But today I'm a bit of a different person. It's not that those things don't count, but newer things have emerged and caught my attention. But so it is an iterative process. I like that phrase that you use. Mm-hmm. It is an iterative process of growth.
Yes. But what will happen is, if we don't do these check-ins and reawakenings, if you will, that life gets a hold of you. I'll sort of use an example. When you're in your 20s, you're trying to make a name for yourself in whatever it is that you do for a career. You're acquiring things, you're possibly getting married and that kind of thing. And life kind of gets a hold of you such that people start telling you what you're really good at and what you should do and what you should think about doing. And gosh, it's great to make, great money and some of these things. And it starts chipping away at who you are, because you get lost in all of that. There's a busyness, if you will, that goes along with certain periods of our lives. And if you don't check in with yourself, it's easy to sort of get swept away in all of that. And before you know it, you look in the mirror and you're not really sure you recognize that person anymore.
Really good thinking. What are these? I guess I'm curious. What do the check-ins look like? Is there? Do you create a list that you match against this list to see, am I true to that, or is it more fluid?
Well, in my book, I offer a couple of suggestions for the reader. The first one I would say is, you don't need a checklist or anything, but periodically, if you stand in front of the mirror, let's just say that you've been experiencing sleepless nights and you have been feeling really like a heavy weight on your shoulders. Those are symptoms that perhaps you're getting away from who you truly are. So when that happens, stand in front of a mirror and look deeply into your eyes and ask yourself, who am I? And wait for a response to come back to you. So sometimes our ego will get involved in that. And there's all kinds of great work on ego, but when the ego gets involved in all of that, you might hear something back that says, you're awesome, Charlie. You're doing it all right. And if you hear a whole lot of that, it's probably, again, sort of check your ego and say, okay, wait a second, let's quiet that down a little bit.
Yeah, tell me.
And think to yourself, really, who am I? Am I showing up in the world in the way that really matters to me? To answer that question, I walk the reader through. The first is, when I talked earlier about knowing who you are. So I believe that we all have 5 to 7 pivotal life moments, and I know you've talked about pivotal life moments too, I believe, in some of your work.
Mm-hmm,
but
I have.
pivotal life moments, those moments that have truly made us who we are. And again, over time, we have more moments and we have more experiences and we change. But thinking through who am I? And then I walk the reader through how to identify their personal values. What really matters to you? That's the values part. So, let's just say that most of us would say honesty is really important to me. That's a personal value. Or my health is really important to me. That's a personal value. Or spending time with my loved ones. That's a personal value. So let's just say spending time with my loved ones is a personal value, and you're looking yourself in the mirror and you ask yourself, am I showing up the way I want to for my loved ones? And you can reflect, you know what, I haven't been here in 2 weeks, or every time I'm with my kids, I'm taking work calls, or every time I sit down with my significant other, I'm really too busy to listen. Or whatever it is that, you would sort of reflect upon. And that's when you need to decide, if that's important, truly a value, showing up for people that I love, and I'm not doing that, then what do I need to do differently? And how am I going to set forward in terms of creating some change in my life so that I am here in a way that I want to be?
Yeah, you're right. You're sort of driving down the lane that I drive down, and part of that is self-reflection. And for me, it's intentional times of quiet and solitude, of being, yes. and Vicki, I have them daily, and I'm pondering me in a context. And I just read Blaise Pascal and Soren Kierkegaard on that subject, and both of them said anybody that is not comfortable being alone to themselves really has no chance of growth, because that is when the loneliness tells you your neediness, and the uncomfortableness of solitude also tells you where your needs are, and it just is grand reflection. So I really like that reflective aspect that you bring to the table.
Yeah, thank you so much. And you're right, Charlie. I mean, in the world that we're in nowadays, everything is fast. We have, high-speed computers in the palm of our hands. Everything comes at us instantly. Makes us forget about the importance of just being alone with your thoughts. But even if your situation is such that you're not choosing to be alone with your thoughts for whatever reason, in the quiet of the night when you're trying to get a good night's sleep, or when you're, inevitably alone, you will get messages that you really aren't showing up in a way that you find truly fulfilling beneath the surface.
Yeah, I'm trying to personalize it, and I'm always been sort of a reflective person. I know I had a job one time that was actually when I was a minister, and I just said, it just hit me, I didn't like this job. I'd done it for 7 years. I'd done it at that time for 6 years, I believe, and I just said, for various reasons, the job didn't fit my personality. And so I said, 1 year from today, and it was June of 89 or 90, I said, I will not be here in 1 year. And I have no idea where I'm going to be, but I know it's not going to be here. And by May of the following year, I got a job opportunity to go back into the corporate world as a consultant. And but that was understanding that the true me, what I really liked about ministry was not really the focus of my job. I said I just needed to do something else. But that is precisely what you're saying. It's that taking that overview, that feeling that sometimes it is just a feeling, isn't it?
Yes.
It's really not quantifiable.
Absolutely.
But paying attention to it.
The messages come to us.
That's what?
The messages definitely come to us.
Yes, they really do. But you never now because thank you for correcting me, but you didn't get to my question, is what reawakened your authenticity?
Well, I've had many reawakenings in my career and, and in my life for sure. So, when I was I'll go back to, when I was a kid in high school, for example, I came from a chaotic family, and I was very good at hiding my situation. So even friends today, some 40-plus years later, are surprised that my home life was so chaotic because I covered it so well. So, when I got into my, I would say 30s, I started to find a voice to be able to talk about some of the experiences I had as a kid. So I would say that was certainly a reawakening.
What gave you the voice? Where did this voice? What gave you the voice? Was it just a maturing and a feeling that you had to articulate this?
Yes, that I did feel that in a way, without having the tools that I offer the readers in my book, that I started to reflect upon my own life story, that I'd been through a lot, and that, I had, once I was in the workplace, especially in my 30s, I started to have a pretty good career, and I was rising in the organization, ultimately ending up in the C-suite. But I would say that I felt like, if somebody called me, because I am a nice person, but sometimes someone would say, oh, she's just a nice lady. And I would start feeling, because that's pretty condescending when someone's, gone to night school for years and gotten an MBA and all those things, that, yes, I am nice, and I'm lots of other things, too. Or they would say, Vicki, we don't want this to hurt your feelings. And I would think back to my story and the chaos that I had already experienced multiple times as a very young person. And I would think to myself, you have no idea how resilient I am. And so as I sort of, in my 30s started thinking about all of those things, and for the listeners, all of you, as you go through identifying these pivotal life moments for yourselves, you will realize that you have endured a lot. You're far stronger than you probably give yourself credit for. You can persevere much better than you probably know. And it's really important to own those stories. So I started just inherently owning my own story and saying, you know what, my situation as a kid, that had nothing to do with me. It impacted me, but it has nothing to do with the kind of person that I can become. So, that was a reawakening. Then as a young mom, I was a perfectionist, which, again, for the listeners, I will say perfection does not exist. No matter how hard we try, it's an illusion. But I was working, and I had young children at home, and I was going to school at night. I had way too much on my plate. And I can remember a drive that I took, and I was driving down the road, and I started to cry, and I thought to myself, I've died and no one noticed. And the reason no one noticed was because I worked so hard to cover how hard it was, how challenging doing all of these things was, and I didn't want anyone to think that I needed help, that I was, quote, human enough to need help. And so that night was a reawakening in my mind, because once I sort of got all of that out, I was able then to more effectively talk about what I needed in order to continue to be a well-balanced person.
Was that moment would you call that a pivotal moment, or is it the result of it? That was a pivotal moment for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, that was a pivotal moment, because I wasn't very good at articulating that I needed help. And I will tell you that there's probably a lot of listeners right now that are thinking to themselves, I don't do that either. I don't ask for help. I just try to do the best that I can and keep going along. And it's sometimes you have this big moment like that one in the car, or maybe even worse, where you realize I cannot do this alone.
Yeah, and and the irony there is that when you do admit that this is an area you want to work on, you want to improve, 75 to 90% of the time people admire that and see that, oh, this person really cares. They know themselves. They have sort of emotional intelligence, and they're prepared to work through it. And they're obviously competent. And we just need to understand that that's the view of other people. It's not that they're saying, "Oh gosh, why don't you know this? You know, you worthless son of a gun, you."
No, you're absolutely right, Charlie. And the other thing is, they're also people that care about you. They're honored to help you.
They are. That is so true. So tell me, for our listeners, because I'm thinking I might like to do it myself, would it be helpful, do you suggest in your book that they just make a list of what they would see are the 5 to 7 key pivotal points, and then, obviously read your book, but if you don't get a chance to read the book, just ponder on those and say, what was the learning? And also to know that pivotal moment doesn't have to be a positive moment.
Correct.
It can be, it can be a very troubling moment, a breakup, a shameful incident, any kind of thing that really impacts you and you feel has sort of shaped part of you, that that is still a pivotal moment. So what do you think about writing those down?
Well, I absolutely believe that you must write them down. I believe within the next 2 or 3 weeks on my website, which is Vicki, VickiZnavor.com, that these tools will be available free. My book is also, the ebook is also discounted right now all the way probably through June, so that readers can get the ebook for $1.99, which I think is important.
Is that on Amazon?
Yes, on Amazon. It was important to me to offer that so that if somebody did want to go out and do the exercises, they could, because it's not just a list of pivotal moments, because while those are important, it also is important that we talk about how did you feel during those pivotal moments, and then what were the takeaways, whether those takeaways were positive or negative. So, for example, one of my stories is that I had an experience really early in my education. I was only in first grade. Talk about a pivotal time, but I was in first grade and I never did my homework. And so when I finally did my homework, what little homework we had in first grade, the whole class clapped, and because it was so unusual. So when I talk about, okay, well, how did I feel about that? I can still remember, and with all of the listeners, with your pivotal moments, you should be able to sort of viscerally feel how it felt then. And I want you to go back and feel what you felt. So I felt so proud of myself, and I felt like, oh, I think I finally understand why this homework thing is so important. And as a result then, so what did I take with me for the rest of my life, basically, is that preparation was really important to me. And that's a really good thing, that to be prepared. But one of the, I'll say, challenges that I had, or something I know about myself, is that once I was an executive or manager, if people came and weren't prepared, I would be irritated by that and disappointed, and I would be visibly disappointed. But I would say, I'd rather you just not come to, just cancel the meeting or reschedule and come when you're prepared. But if somebody tried to pretend that they were prepared but they really weren't, that would bump up against that value, and I would, not react very positively in a situation like that. So I know that from my story. So that these, the tool in the book sort of asks you to go through all 3 of those aspects of, the experiences.
And those are who you are, what matters most, and.
No, it would be, what's your pivotal moment? How did I feel about that pivotal moment?
Oh, I'm sorry.
And then what's the takeaway?
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice, boy. That exercise is worth the podcast right there. Because,
thank you.
Well, seriously, because you will learn so much about yourself, and be able to perhaps erase some of that false self and fall into line with the true self.
Yeah, and I think it is important to, as you said, to really write things down. And if you uncover something that is, some of us unfortunately have experienced horrific things. When I'm thinking about, sexual assault or sexual abuse or something like that. And if you uncover something like that, my hope is that you will get professional help for that, because it does require a higher degree of assistance in order to move forward. So my book covers that a little bit, but I just want to remind the readers, because, we sometimes when we're going through things like this, we do uncover memories that we perhaps had buried for quite some time.
And the most difficult ones are the ones where we are the culprit.
Yeah.
That we have done something to hurt somebody. And, maybe far in the past, and through naivete, youth, immaturity, and who knows what all, that we take a look at it now and go, oh my goodness, I can't even believe I was like that. That we do still have to revisit that, and maybe even get professional help for that, to forgive ourselves, to say we've changed, and that is no longer who I am. That was part of myself in the past, but that's not part of me now. So I want to include both sides of that. That rarely do we talk about the culprit, and the culprit going through, when I say the culprit, the responsible party, and going through their difficulties that they're facing later in life of shame and sorrow.
Yes.
And all of us have them to some degree or another.
Of course.
Let's go back. I wanted. I'm just looking at what my notes I have here for, because we're coming close to a break. But I want to do this question first, Paul. Okay. So I want to understand. I tried to repeat them and I misunderstood on the pivotal core on the pivotal moments. The definition of core characteristics of an authentic person is to who you are, what matters most, and how you bring that into the world. Is that something like that?
Yes.
So my question then, and with this will be our question before the break, what are the benefits of that?
Yeah, I've had quite a few people ask, why do you care? And the reason is that, now that I'm 60 years old, I'm looking back on most of, I have more years behind me than ahead, and I would say that you don't want to get to the end of your life and look backwards and say, you know what, I never had the guts to show up as who I truly am. I was somebody else. And that, I think, is really just a shame. And frankly, I think all of us have many talents that we can offer this world, and being somebody else is not allowing those talents to come forward. And when they do come forward, if all of us were to show up as who we are and give our very best every single day to the best of our ability, I do believe that the world can be a better place. When we can look at other human beings and appreciate that they're unique and wonderful too, and have something to offer, I think it makes a difference in the world.
Boy, that is so well said. I so agree. And with that, we're going to take a brief break, and then we're going to come back, go into a little bit different section, okay?
Great.
Hi, this is Charlie Hedges, and you're listening to The Next Chapter with Charlie, and my very special guest today is Vicki Znavor, and she is executive C-suite HR person, not self-educated, but night school educated, got her bachelor's degree and her master's degree, and she has just written a wonderful book, Authenticity ReAwakened. And it's talking about your life story and fulfilling your life purpose. And I've got a question for you that I wanted to ask it in the last section, but we'll end the last section with this question. You stated one of the benefits is that you can make a difference in the world, and that you can make a difference by much greater difference by being aligned with who you are than being aligned with what somebody else wants you to be. And I'm wondering, I'm thinking of the corporate environment. I'm thinking of, our culture in America of groupthink, and we're getting more into groupthink and less into individual think, and the difficulties that a person may encounter in being an individual, authentic person. In your experience, because I think this comes to play, but I'm wondering, in your experience, what role does fear play in preventing us from being authentic?
Well, it plays a significant role. And, all human beings, Charlie, we're all afraid of something. We all want to be appreciated and respected and cared about, and we don't want to be rejected. Some of those types of things. And at work, when somebody doesn't agree with us, it hurts. We don't want to be vulnerable to people. And as a result of that fear, fear of not being accepted, fear of standing out, fear of some type of stigma or whatever it might be, we learn to just, stop talking and fall in line. And good leaders, my master's degree is in leadership, and I would say that good leaders really do inspire the people that they work with to have a voice, to speak up. They appreciate differences on teams and things like that. I know I certainly did. But
there are very few leaders like that, don't you think? Don't you think other leaders that is not as common as we would like it to be?
Yeah, I mean, and it really hurts me to say that, Charlie, because I know that people certainly are trying. But yes, when push comes to shove, if we think about the world we're in, especially in American society, there is so much pressure every single day. You're doing more with less, and people just need to get stuff done. So I understand why leaders do that. It's not that it's their intention to not hear their people or to not respect them or value those different opinions. They're just trying to get things done. And sometimes when you have somebody who doesn't agree with a point of view, it takes a little longer. But ultimately, different points of view are what really create the best outcome, too, because then you're really working to try to, as long as you know what you're trying to get to, and if everybody can contribute, it's a proven fact that the outcome will be better if you're able to listen to those different points of view. But that's one of the great examples of losing ourselves along the way. If you fall in line, get in line, and do what you're told, oftentimes that's how you're promoted. That's how you get...
you're rewarded. You're rewarded for not being you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And then you're punished when you are being you. And
then, yes.
Not overt punishment, but sort of unacceptance and back, and water cooler talk and that sort of thing. Yes.
Now, this is where, I think as you're sort of evaluating your work experience, that if this happens on a much too frequent basis where your voice, you are starting to really understand who you are and what's important to you, and your voice is consistently not heard or not appreciated, that's a good sign to start thinking about an exit strategy. How do I go on to an organization or something else that would be more in line with, allowing me to show up at least a little bit like myself?
Yeah, I can see that, especially for younger people, for the millennials and the other groups that I can't recall the name of, that are 20s to 40s. But what about people that are not near retirement, but within a decade or two of retirement? That's kind of difficult, isn't it?
It is difficult, for sure. I mean, this is where, perhaps you may have had years already, 10 or 20 years already of sort of figuring out how to go along, to get along. But if it becomes more important, I will say I left an organization I was at for over 25 years because my values no longer matched the company's values. So I was close to 50, and I had no trouble finding another position, and I have no regrets that I did that, because it was the best thing that I could have done. I couldn't work in an organization anymore that no longer fit my life. But I know that we all have difficult decisions that we have to make as it relates to our own personal situations. If you're at a situation that you don't feel that you're able to be yourself, I would say find other areas of your life that you can maximize who you are. Maybe it's outside organizations, doing things with your church, doing things with community organizations, etc., where more of your true self can come through.
I was going to suggest that exact same thing. If you can't, if it's just not reasonable, and you take a look at your future as you're getting older, and you just realize it's impractical and it's negative to my future, that I really can't do that, then find some place outside of work. I know at 60 years old I taught myself to paint. And then I continued to write. I continued to travel. But all of these, and I work with a nonprofit, and I'm very active with a nonprofit. Those are ways that, although I was fulfilled in my job, I want to be fulfilled in the not my jobs.
Right.
That I am still doing something that is in line with the core me, and I'm expressive and creative, and that's where you really can't be creative unless you're authentic. Do you think?
I do. I agree with that, absolutely. Yeah, Charlie, you're onto something there.
Well, just thinking, now I wanted to ask a question, and I think we've probably answered it, but I think repeating it will not hurt for my audience. That I wanted you to walk me through this, Vicki. I have two questions. One, how can I evaluate my authenticity? Let me just go ahead and give your answers. The answer is ponder. And that's think about my activities, write down my pivotal moments, and ponder those with your three questions that I'm sorry I can't remember. What were the three questions?
Sure. What was the experience? How did I feel with the experience? And what was the takeaway?
Yeah, those are great. Those are great questions. Really, I'm not just saying that. I'm not easy on these kinds of things. Usually, I say yeah. But they're very simple, and I think they can make a big difference. Those are great. And so then my second question was, okay, I've identified some areas that are not consistent with the true inner core me or the authentic me. How do I go about making improvements to more closely align with my truest inner self?
Sure. So I just want to add one additional point on the knowing who you are, all that we just described. That's absolutely true. My book does help you identify your personal values, because I think that gets at the heart of what matters to you. Huge. Yes, so there is an exercise that goes through values, and it is something that you're going to need the book and or the table, and if you go to my site in a couple of weeks, it should be there. And then lastly, I would say that, this whole concept, again, of, as you said, reflecting upon what's important, and then if you say, okay, these are the areas that I know are so important to me and I'm not showing up this way, then you really have to think about, I always like the question, what will make it better? So ask yourself that. What will make it better? I'm not living up to my values today, but what will make it better? And think about, just a few steps. What are some things that I can do right away to start turning this around? So it might be, when I'm with my loved one, I'm going to put my phone away, and I'm going to actively listen to what they're saying. Or I'm going to take my kids to the park. Or I'm going to, when the next time somebody says something that's racist or discriminatory at work, I'm actually going to say, please don't speak that way in my presence. you can practice what it is that you're going to say in those situations where you really feel strongly about something, and write them down, and then hold yourself accountable to actually taking those steps that you said.
Because when you said hold yourself accountable, that is really critical. It's something we talk a lot about, and that's about discipline. It becomes a discipline, and that you have a discipline. I have all the listeners know I have a morning discipline, and my morning discipline would take care of all of this. But every morning, now I'm retired, so I don't have to be at a job at 7 or 8 o'clock. Mm-hmm. But I'm still up at 6:30 and doing my practice that requires discipline. Now, my time in Africa for 3 weeks, I lost track of that discipline, and because of the time zone change, I've just in the last couple of days, reformed or reintroduced myself to my disciplines. And Vicki, I got to tell you, it just makes all the difference in the world. Just 1 or 2 more days just reminds me, I slip right back into the nice part rather than the confusing part.
Absolutely. And it can be overwhelming when you think about change of any kind, but this is why it's so important to break it down into smaller, manageable steps. And then if you slip up, and sometimes we do, just as you said, hop back on as soon as you realize you sort of strayed away from what you intended to do, and just keep going.
Yeah, and I would encourage readers, after they do your 7 pivotal moments and read your book, that it doesn't hurt to just take once a month and take 5 minutes and review those. Just look at them again. Just remind yourself of them. I journal daily, and there's certain journal entries that I go back and I read because they were so fulfilling to me that it really makes a difference.
Yeah. And you ultimately, what you're working toward for all of us, and it doesn't matter if you're 25 or 85, it doesn't matter how old you are, we're still living. And I think if you just remind yourself why it's important to you, and just keep that in mind, it will give you the additional push that you need to sort of stay on track and stay focused.
Yes. As we're wrapping up, one thing I'm noticing, in your subtitle, you talk about fulfilling your purpose. It's just so obvious that if you are your truest inner self, your authentic self, then you can't help but fulfill your purpose. I mean,
right.
You would have to almost try not to, because you're acting according to your purpose, according to the way you're designed to work and to achieve. And there's a strong relationship between authenticity and purpose.
Absolutely. And I help the reader with that, too, by just sort of focusing on, understanding what it is that you want in this life. What do you really want? We're great at talking about what we don't want or what we don't like, but what do you want? And then, when you're at your best, what does that look like? And then what do you believe? So there's a whole exercise around that, but ultimately, Charlie, it gets to exactly what you just said, that we really can't live up to our God-given purpose if we're showing up as somebody else.
Yeah. We are taught that as children. Our parents frequently give us indicators of what we should do with our lives, and then we've got teachers and peers telling us what we should do with our lives, and we start listening to them, and we get on, and it's like I used to say that it's like climbing the ladder of success, reaching the top and finding your ladder was leaning against the wrong building.
Absolutely.
So, as we wrap up, Producer Paul is very fond of reminding us of tombstones or urns. He always points out that we really have 3 elements of a tombstone. You have a birth date, a death date, and in between is a dash, is a short line. The dates themselves of birth and death are interesting, but what really counts your whole life is in that dash. That's what's important. I wish we could have meaningful dashes and unmeaningful dashes. But, if you can make that dash meaningful by doing the things that you're suggesting in reawakening your authenticity. I'm going to highly encourage our readers to pick up the book. It will be on the show notes with an Amazon link, as will your excellent, really, really well done website.
Oh, thank you.
I don't know who your designers are, but they're very good.
Thank you so much. I'll definitely share that with Deanna, who does all my work. She's fantastic.
I'm just curious, is this a WordPress or is this different?
It's WordPress.
Yeah. Man, what a powerful little instrument. So, yeah, I would really encourage people to get more involved with your work, Vicki. I think you can, if people can follow some of your guidelines, it will make a major impact on their life. I really want to thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Charlie. I really appreciate it.
Well, Vicki Znavor, it's just been such a pleasure having you on the show today. And I also want to thank all our listeners for tuning into The Next Chapter with Charlie. And please be sure to check us out at our website, thenextchapter.life. And until next, this is Charlie Hedges signing off. Bye for now.